I'm like, oh, I'll be a graphic designer because then I can like drink beer and screen print and like, be cool and like listen to music while I'm working. And, it's all kind of fun stuff.
Hello and welcome to Did I Do That? It is a podcast about making graphic design and making mistakes because it's all part of the process. And joining me today, a very special guest here in Vancouver, not Washington, British Columbia, in Canada, no less. Not that other one, to differentiate it even further. He's a freelance illustrator. He's also a full-time librarian. And as if he doesn't have enough books in his life, Mr. Book over here, he's got a new book out called Pond Life that you can both get and enjoy from Perfectly Acceptable Press. And can I tell you, from doing both, it is more than perfectly acceptable. I would even dare say it is great.
Wow.
It's Hiller Goodspeed. Hi, Hiller.
Hey, hi.
Well, I wanted to start us off actually with a question that is certainly on everyone's mind. What could possibly happen in the Spirit Halloween movie? Did you, first of all, hear about the Spirit Halloween movie?
The Spirit Halloween movie.
Making a movie out of the store Spirit Halloween.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
This is news to me.
Tis the season for Spirit Halloweens. They're popping up all over the city, I've noticed.
Is it like an infomercial kind of thing, or is it actually a full length? Like, is it straight to VHS, or is it?
Supposedly, It is a full length theatrically released movie.
Okay.
Who's to say? It might be Warner Brothers, so they might just crumple it up into a ball and then throw it in the trash. But let's hope that's not true. Although that would be fitting because that's sort of what Spirit Halloween does in like November of every year.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I was in a Spirit Halloween, but I've been in many, and they're always kind of weird spaces with weird costumes and like weird walls that are not really walls that like
very
are,
temporary walls.
Yeah, and like it's a weird like interdimensional space. And the employees are often kind of they're working there, but are they really?
What are you gonna do? Fire me? I know I'm going to get fired in a month. So
yeah, it's a weird place to be.
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's going to be some sort of like it's not going to be a well-made movie. It might cost a lot of money, but very, very ephemeral. I'm imagining this film to be.
Is you think the store itself will be like part of the movie, or is it just like in the spirit of Spirit Halloween?
Well, it's like in Sex and the City, how really New York City is the fifth character.
Right.
I think the Spirit Halloween store is the perhaps primary character. Take that, Sex and the City. But what does Spirit have to offer? Like they have reuse of spooky spaces that are otherwise abandoned that used to be Rite Aids or whatnot.
Right, Targets and
London Drugs
Kmart.
Up here, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Then they've got the temporary walls, the temporary employees, the temporary third thing, temporary bathrooms probably. I'm imagining they're not paying to have the plumbing hooked back up.
Yeah, likely not.
No. So, I feel like that's pretty spooky just off the bat.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what you could fill an hour and a half with, that has to do with spirit. But I would pay to see it.
Yeah.
I would just to see how much of a plane wreck it is. I would go to the theater and see that movie.
Actually, maybe that's the solution. Maybe it's like, kind of genre shifting. Like as you're walking down the aisles, it's like, oh, here's the, plane crash survivor costumes, so popular circa 2010 with Lost.
Yeah.
Here's the vampire costumes, because that's what they assumed the third season of Lost would be about.
Right.
Here's the polar bear costume. What are some other Lost costumes?
I have never seen Lost before.
Oh, it's not very good. You shouldn't watch.
You know what? I was around when everyone was watching it, and then it came close to the end, and everyone seemed the overwhelming feeling I got was that it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And people are like, if you haven't seen it, don't even start. And I just never did.
It's got Game of Thrones syndrome, to be sure. Like, people love the beginning, and then it becomes more and more clear with time that nobody knows really what's going on or why anything is happening.
That happens sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, there's a part where they travel back to the 1970s for half a season.
That's cool.
And I couldn't begin to tell you why that happens.
I'm into that. I like time travel.
It's the only time travel in the show, though, unfortunately.
Did they go to space?
Oh God, that's a missed opportunity. I can't believe Fast and the Furious beat lost to space.
Space is always like the final frontier in terms of like, where can you take this show? I mean, everything, if it gets to space and it's not like a space show, it's not good.
Now you're getting me very worried about Fast and the Furious, because they've
Well,
already gone to space and they've got a 10th. Yeah.
Again, I'm way behind on that franchise.
You haven't seen F9.
I haven't seen F1. I don't know if I've ever. I'm just I like movies, but I often have a hard time, getting into like Die Hard and stuff like that. Like Erin will often ask me, my partner Erin will, want to sit down and watch these movies, and I'm like, I just don't really, I'm not feeling it. I'm trying to cover the classics, and then maybe, I'll move on to the Die Hards and the Fast and the Furious.
I would say probably Fast and the Furious is better than Die Hard. Don't email me, because it's about family and their friends, and they look out for each other, and then sometimes they go to space.
That's true. I mean, I don't even know. I can't imagine how they would get to space
in a car.
Okay.
The normal way you would.
Yeah.
You just drive in your car to the International Space Station, and there you go.
Yeah.
And they have a special carport,
Right, of
course.
Yeah.
The little garage door opener you get to press.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's literally a thing that happens.
Yeah, that's
drive to the International Space Station.
That's kind of wild. I can imagine what a space car looks like.
Closer to regular car than you would expect.
Okay.
You would think that they would have done, say, more sealing of the car?
Yeah.
No, that didn't really seem to be a concern.
Was it still like a 4-door kind of situation?
Yeah, pretty much 4 doors. I don't believe it had tires. I think that was sort of their main difference to space.
Okay.
No road, so what do you need tires for?
Do the tires maybe like, turn upwards and go into the car like Back to the Future, and it kind of like flies away?
No, that's also a missed opportunity. Although, who knows, maybe Robert Zemeckis has a patent on slide up tires. But no, these are just sealed over wheel wells with just like, the kind of metal that you have on the bottom of like a shop floor to stop oil from spilling.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, space easier to drive around in than you would expect. Hiller, you're originally from Florida.
I'm from Florida.
What drew you into design? Like, I assume you've always been drawing.
Yeah. So I've always drawn, and like even in high school, I'd like make collages, and I would listen to like, music and like ska music, and I would, make art, and I would sit at the kitchen table as a kid and like middle school especially, and just draw as a means to entertain myself. And so I did a lot of that. And graphic design, the crossover there kind of happened when I would, there was this record store called Park Ave CDs, and I would go there, and they had posters, and they had local like screen printed gig posters.
Oh shoot.
And
okay.
so I would, and they were on sale for, it was like $15, $20. And I would look through the posters, and they were just like really nice. And, I bought a couple, I'm sure, and then I noted the name of the studio, Lure Design, and I actually went to their studio, which is only a few, it was nearby, and, talked with them, like, in high school. And so I would just kind of, it was a nice space to be in, because it was a really cool design studio, and they were, like, really into music, and, like, they had, like, a screen printing setup, and it was kind of, like, grungy, but it was cool. And so that kind of maybe sparked my interest in design itself.
How old were you when you were visiting this space?
Oh, I was probably 17 or 18. I didn't go there all the time. I went there a couple times, and I think I printed a couple things there. Like they were kind in the way that they maybe saw this like bright and bubbly, high schooler, and I did go back there from time to time, like throughout college and whatnot. But kind of something clicked, and I'm thinking about what I could do at college, and I always wanted to draw, and so I just reconciled that desire with like, what am I going to do for a job? And I'm like, oh, I'll be a graphic designer, because then I can like drink beer and screen print and like, be cool and like listen to music while I'm working, and it's all kind of fun stuff. So that's how I interpret it as like a high schooler. And then I went to Flagler College in St. Augustine, which is the oldest city in America.
That's beautiful. So you're at Flagler. Like, what are you studying? What are you like messing around with?
So I got my degree in graphic design. So I was taking a lot of like design classes, like drawing 1, drawing 2, drawing 3, classes that kind of get you thinking about like visual spaces, art history. I had a minor in advertising.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did. And so I took classes. I think for each minor, you only had to take, I don't know, 6 or 7 classes. And so I did that. I wanted to get a minor in illustration as well. I was just kind of collecting, like I was trying to see what I could like get.
Oh, so they actually had an illustration program, kind of.
They did. So
Wow.
I took illustration 1, and it was, this guy who had, been an illustrator for a long time and had his idea of what an illustrator was. And it was fun. It was kind of, it was enlightening, a way to kind of, take what I was interested in and, focus it more on this idea that you're working for a client and you have to like the way you have to think about like concepts and ideas. And like, it got me thinking more about how that all works. And so I think that was maybe the only, like I don't think I actually got the minor in illustration, but I was definitely interested in it because in the back of my head, I just wanted to draw stuff.
Yeah.
So I was still, designing websites and trying to, figure out like CSS and all that. But, at the end of the day, I'm like, well, it'd be nice if I could just like, paint and like draw and make stuff like that.
Did you get to like do much freelance down there before you moved out to Portland, or was that like pretty much a thing post Portland reset?
I did quite a bit of freelance. So I had like in the photos I sent you, I made like a couple posters. Like I had an illustration teacher, or it was a graphic design 2 teacher who at the end of class came over and was like, hey, I'm doing this project for the crocodile farm. They're doing this Elton John, like, night. Can you draw like a crocodile Elton John, just playing the piano? And I'm like, she's like, I'll give you $30. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
And so I did it. This is one of, I think, 2 drawings I did, but the only way I knew how to color stuff was to live trace it and like color fill in Illustrator. And so, it kind of, that's like, maybe that's the first thing that anyone ever gave me money for.
Wow.
And it was kind of fun, it was like a little, spot illustration. I think, there was a 5x7 like mailer that it went on, and I was kind of proud to do it. Like it was like, oh, this teacher, I don't know what she had seen me do, like, what in my assignments made her think like, oh, I'm going to ask this like kid to like do this drawing so I can use it in my like my actual other job. Like, I can, make that work. But it was fun to work on.
It's really beautiful. To describe it, you've got crocodile at microphone in purple blazer with some little sparklies on the lapels, and of course top hat with feather in it.
And cummerbund.
Of course.
Yeah. It was fun to work on. You can kind of see like the line work is kind of like live tracey.
Yeah,
like I didn't really know how to get around that.
But
I think at that point I was like not really sure how to work with like rasterized things. So I just kind of like, I preferred the vector and I would just, work in Illustrator. But
I mean, it's got like the line work still has lots of character in it. And I think that's something that like it feels like is this like natural carryover into your current work.
Yeah, and it still kind of feels, like my drawing skills are they exist, but they're not like like actually in drawing 1 there was a lot of like pushback from the instructor because he's like, oh, this is very like, I would draw this like wooden, like it'd be like a room with a wood floor and like wood grain, and I'd be like drawing the wood grain, like he's like, this is too much graphic design, like I need more like gesture and more, I was like,
you're a graphic design major. What does he want?
Well, yeah, but this was in drawing class, so it was like no hard lines, you're all shading, and you're supposed to work with a pencil in a certain way, the graphite stick. And I would just draw like a very hard line and be like, this is like, this is what I'm seeing. And it was hard for me to think of like, drawing in a way that's like, it's all shading and like, it's like a gray scale. There's no blacks, there's no whites. It's all just kind of floating and meshing into itself. I had a friend who would draw like cathedral scenes on like, massive, like maybe like 4x3 feet, like pieces of paper.
Jesus.
And they would take, 72 hours and, of collective like drawing and they were beautiful, but I could never really work like that. I was always, trying to just draw the thing like in a way that was not as, delicate or elegant as he would have liked.
Well, I mean, I think you you found a way to make a living from drawing.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
still like. I mean, I guess it's you're learning the principles and ideas. It's more about what you're learning by doing that work than like the actual work itself.
Yeah.
And so maybe I didn't learn a lot of the fundamentals of like like shading and that. But I think I've done okay.
I would say so. Is there any other stuff in here that was from this
So
era?
the first thing, that poster, this was actually one of the first things I was ever asked to do, like at all, like before I even like really began like design. This was in like 2007.
Oh wow.
My friend Zach was in the band Clown Car Commute, and so they were playing the Futuron Films in Space and the Strangers Family Band. They were all kind of like psychedelic cool bands from Orlando. And I didn't even know Zach at the time, but he got in touch with me and he was like, "Hey, I heard you do art or something. Can you make a poster for this show that like I've convinced these bands to come up on it was like a Wednesday or something." And so I was into like Russian, kind of Soviet era like design. So I
Yeah.
found this like free, typeface that I used to try to make it look cool. I had this old photograph of this explosion from like I don't know what's even going on there, but this was like my first, like I'm trying to make a cool gig poster. So.
I mean, I love it. Like you're really rocking that Soviet look. It's like sepia toned. Like
Yeah, and that's kind of like I've always had this fascination with like older things. Like I work like where I work, the library, it's a special collections, so we have a lot of like really
the
old like
oldest.
photos and maps and like like ephemera and old things that I just look through all the time. But I've always had this fascination with like that whole kind of like feeling of like old.
There's
things.
something I'm a big fan of special collections in libraries just generally.
And then I was drawing all kinds of things. People would ask me to make posters for their whatever, and I would like there were dance nights, there were coffee shop shows, and I would just like make these fun posters that were always kind of goofy. And they would give me free admission to the show, or give me a couple of drink tickets, or I think maybe once or twice they gave me like $20. But it was fun to be asked to do stuff, and I was happy to do it. And it was for someone else to give you an idea, and they're like, "Hey, there's this disco night, and like, can you make a poster for it?" And I would have to think of like what does a Halloween dance night look like? What does this like like different like parties and ideas. And it was the first time that I ever really had to I had a concept given to me, and I had to think of a way to like bring it to life. So it was good practice.
I mean, that's the funnest kind of stuff though, where you just like you have a very simple brief and you're just like, what is disco night?
It was a great place to like make mistakes and just kind of like I used a lot of like, again, a lot of Illustrator, so it often looked kind of like funny, but I had a good time, and I learned a lot about just like how to turn a concept into a poster that would get people to come.
Did you ever have one that like felt like it went completely sideways on you?
Man, I not that I can think of. I mean, I had some that were. I remember there was one Halloween party, and I did the like giant like marshmallow like monster from Ghostbusters.
Oh yes, the
And
Stay
that
Puft
one,
Marshmallow Man.
yeah, and I had this weird way of working in Illustrator where I didn't really understand the color fill, so I would use the pen tool, and I would click anchors around the shapes, and I would make that shape like purple or whatever. And so I would color things by clicking like in the line work, and so it would take me hours to like
God.
it was a really like I didn't really I understood it in a way that I could do it, and that's how I worked. I never once thought like there's probably a way you can do this in like a few seconds. So I would just like I would spend a tremendous amount of time. If there was like bubble text, I would have to click around like all the points in the T, and then
Oh
be like, oh, this is gonna
no.
be like a blue color. And so it was. I
Are
think
these
that
also like live Tracy things where it's just dumped 5,000 nodes all over the thing?
yeah.
Oh
So essentially, and
God.
so that was, I mean, the whole
Oh.
thing was kind of sideways in the sense that I was spending, a long time coloring, and then I eventually moved to taking photographs of stuff. So I would draw something, and I would take a photo of it, or there was one time where I hand drew a lot of text, and I cut it all out and I had like 4 or 5 of my friends all out of frame kind of like place the text in the frame of the poster, and I would photograph it. And so I kind of, I stepped away from Illustrator and like was working more with like a photography like kind of like direction, which worked better and was, I think, more successful.
So you're doing music posters and stuff like that down in Florida, and now you move up to the Pacific Northwest, to Portland.
Yes, yeah. I had visited Portland in 2009, and it seemed pretty cool. Just it always had a reputation as being a cool place. And so I worked a couple of jobs in Orlando, and then in October, I'm like, I'm going to buy a one-way ticket to Portland and just see what happens.
Just not knowing anything at all about
No, I had like a backpack. I didn't really even bring anything with me. And I flew into Portland. I lived in Olympia, Washington for a month with my friends, Jessica and Britta. They hosted me, like, they were very kind and just let me, crash on their couches.
What did you end up doing design-wise up here?
So when I first moved here, I just started like getting in touch with people that I knew from like Twitter or like online. And it was kind of awkward from my perspective now. Like I didn't really know what I was doing. But I mostly posted to Tumblr. I met all these people in Portland, and I would just kind of like do things. Like I know that like Kate would, have classes and would have, events and things like that, which would be posted on a somewhat public forum. And I would, check these websites and I'm like, oh, Tad Carpenter is going to be speaking in Kate's class on Tuesday morning. I'm gonna show up,
Yeah.
not as a student, but just as like an observer, and I'll sit in the back of the class and just like watch the like talk with Tad. And like I did that, and I walked in and like I had met Kate maybe once or twice, and Kate was like, oh, hey Hiller, how's it going? I'm like, oh, good. I'll just sit back here. That happened a few times, like kind of this like really I was bold in the way that I was just assuming I could just be included.
Yeah.
And so I did things like that as a way to like make myself feel like I was like, participating in the design culture, even though I was just like taking a student space in the, that like whatever was going on. So it was inappropriate, but Kate was very, very kind and was never like, hey, like you're not actually in this class. You can't like join us.
Well, I mean, knowing some of the things that we're talking about, like a lot of them aren't really class things. They're just like, they're for students more generally, but
that's true. I think that was the idea. It wasn't like a class thing. It was like a, hey, like PSU, design team, we're gonna, if you want to come to do this thing, like show up at this place at 4:30. And I was like, I would love to do that. So I it was kind of an invitation. Maybe it was more for like the university, but I was just kind of doing all kinds of things like that. And eventually I did get an internship. So I was working for free at Big Giant. A lot of like late nights, like was working there on all kinds of stuff. And that was interesting. Like with, I don't know, I haven't even checked in with them, but like Jason Bacon, he was the principal designer, and he was there 24 hours a day. He would
God.
There were some days where I would get there and he would be like, I've just been working. Like he was like a really hard worker. And so I was there for a couple months, and then Jason Miranda. So Switchblade Design, these are all studios from like late 2010. I worked with him for a month or so, and that was there was the building that Floating World used to be in. There's
yes,
like the laundry building.
Recently departed Floating World.
Yes, yeah, they're in the mall now.
They're in the mall.
That's it. It looks great. Like I think that the space is, it looks good.
I mean, if we're gonna turn a place cool, that's a good place to start, because there's nothing else going on in that place now.
The Lloyd Center, like I'm fond of like the Lloyd Center. I used to like spend like not a ton of time, but I used to go there like often and just kind of like hang out. And
there's an ice skating rink, like.
Yeah, I do remember, like, I think there was, like, a Mexican place or something, and, like, drinking, like, margaritas, and, like,
I don't think that's there so much anymore.
Yeah, it was kind
of...
a
lot of the food and beverage is hurting,
It was a weird space, but I think that we should take back malls. I mean, if they're going to exist, we should just fill them with, like, the things we want.
Turn Nordstrom's into a giant Spirit Halloween.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I mean, yeah, that would work, I think.
Yeah.
anyway, so I was working with Switchblade Design, and they were also, very kind in that they recognized that I was just this kind of like dopey, doe-eyed, designer guy who, thought that I could be a, world-class designer, and I already was in my mind. So, yeah, I worked there for a while too.
What kind of work were you doing at these studios?
At Switchblade Design, I was working on this snowboard catalog, and I think that so Jason Miranda had come to Big Giant, and he was like, "Hey, like, why don't you come work with me? Like, I'll pay you." And I'm like, "Oh,
that sounds like an improvement.
That would be nice."
Yeah.
Like, I hadn't at that point. I was still kind of like I had money saved up, so I wasn't like, I wasn't hurting in that sense. But I was like, "Oh, that sounds great. I'll get paid for like, drawing stuff." And so, like, and I think the idea was that I would work on all these like elements that would go into the skateboarding catalog. And so like all the like little details and like drawings and things like that. Although that project did fall through, I think. And so, I was just there to work on that. And then once that kind of like, stopped, he was like, "Hey, like, it's been fun, but like, we're going to have to part ways."
Oh.
Yeah, and so I mean,
it
was kind of like a conditional thing where it's like, well, we have this project, we'd love to like have you work on it, and I'm like, oh, okay, great, but once the project ends, it's like they can't continue to And it was a small studio too. It was just like a 2-person studio, so it was. I mean, it was
not a lot of growth.
Not a lot of growth, but it was. They were very nice to me, and it was a cool space. It was much like it was like a lure design studio kind of thing where it felt like it felt like a cool place to be in, like get a coffee and like, go into work. And it was like, it felt very good to be there.
I mean, what more can you want from work? And also they pay you, which is, again,
it
really
was,
important and good.
Yeah, it was novel to be paid for stuff. And yeah, it was a good experience.
So after there, where did you go? What was the next step?
So then I worked in Switchblade Design from, I would say, like late January to like the end of February. And actually,
it's still so bleak outside.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was my first. I'd only arrived in Portland in November, so like I rented a place from. So I was like,
so you've gotten to see all the worst that Portland has to offer.
Yeah, it was like
weather.
Yeah, but I kind of enjoyed it. Like one of the reasons I moved to Portland was because after living in Florida, like the heat and humidity and the sunshine, it's nice, but like I kind of wanted like cold. I wanted rainy. I wanted to like drink hot coffee and like not like, sweat and like be like, so uncomfortable. So I moved to Portland to kind of like live in that like, climate. And I really enjoyed it. And I still enjoy it.
So after Switchblade, like where did you end up next?
So my dad passed away like,
oh shit.
So in January of 2011, my dad passed away, and that was when I had just started at Switchblade, and I think I did a lot of like disassociating, and I started like I had a really like tough time.
Yeah.
And so I like once the Switchblade thing ended, I didn't really like pursue another like design thing. I just kind of like hung out and just tried to like like take it easy and and I was by myself.
Well,
and so
I mean, it's so hard to be like actively on that train when you are like your head is somewhere else. Your head is in this traumatic like, how do I cope with this?
Yeah,
space?
And again, looking back, like I can understand like what was going on, but at the time I was kind of like, I mean, I was okay, but I was also like not okay.
Yeah.
And it took me like a year or two to kind of like figure out what I was gonna do. And in that time, I worked for the security group at the Rose Garden. And so I would like, for basketball games and concerts and stuff, I would, walk around parking lots and just make sure, no one was breaking into cars. I would,
you're just one of the people with the flashlight.
Like, yeah, I would check bags at the Rose Garden. I would like stand at like a entrance to a beer garden for 12 hours and, in Hood River and like check IDs and like, it was a very like it was an odd demanding job, but it was something that allowed me to just kind of like take it easy. It's like, oh, can you walk around this like parking lot for 4.5 hours and then at like 9:45 come back here and like you can sign out. And so I could just kind of walk around and like think about stuff and like it was nice to do that. And like I it wasn't a great job, but it was kind of something I could do that, wasn't like demanding in like a mental way.
Yeah, and I could see how that could be like, exactly what you need at that moment, but also like very creatively refreshing. Like I know I've talked about in the past, like there is this like sense of creative depletion sometimes you can get when you're
Yeah.
working like on a big project or a bunch of different things all at once where you just like I don't have any more juice in me. I don't know.
Yeah, and for me, a way to restore that like juice is just to think, just to
Yeah.
like take time and just like sit on a bench and like, just like stare out into the sky and just like take a lot of time to just, move slowly and, consider ideas and directions and do that. So that job was great for that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, but that whole time I was still making art and posting it to my Tumblr because that's like what I actually wanted to do. And
Did you like have any sense that that was going to be kind of like what your future was going to look like at that
not
moment?
really. I knew I wanted to draw and work on stuff, and so I did that like for myself, and I would share it just as a way to so people could see it. So it's like I want people that know me to see what I'm working on, and I just kind of continued to do that, and I just did it for years, and it kind of like I got more like invitations and like commissions to like do stuff and like, oh hey, can you work on this poster, can you do this logo? Like I have like a couple of my early like projects, which is from maybe earlier 2010. But people would hear about me, and I would get an email and they'd be like, hey, we have this like campaign, this Facebook campaign, like on the far right side at the top. Yeah.
This way I.
So this water company got in touch with me and they're like, hey, can you make these like eight, can you make 8 banners for our Facebook page, that's each one has a theme about like you know drinking water and like being active and
Can we say the name of this water
yeah,
company? It's
yeah,
Evian, the fancy
yeah,
water.
Evian, yeah. And
Oh my
so it
god.
was like one of my like early clients, and
Wow.
I didn't really know how to quote stuff and how to like how to like go about the business stuff. Each one will take me 2 or 3 hours, and like I had to make 8 of them.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, great, sounds good. uh and then the first two came out pretty quick. And what I learned very fast is that when you're being paid for work, it's very different from when you're just like doing it for fun. And so it became this thing where the first concepts came quickly, but then it got really hard and it was like really demanding. And I had been dating my partner Erin uh, at that time only for a few months. She helped a lot when it came to helping me like come up with ideas and concepts and kind of working through this like mental block because
Yeah.
I didn't really have any ideas beyond the first two. I thought was it was fun, and I did it, but then I was like I'm kind of done with this. It's like, well, I still need to make 6 more. And so it
Wait, so they really hadn't given you any structure for this other
no, it
than
was, I think I had to like float the concepts by them, like, and I probably did like thumbnails and like did the things I was supposed to be doing. And so I forget exactly how the conversation went, but I remember it was just this guy who was working with Evian and was like, hey, like, and again, I don't know where they saw my work, like, but they saw it somewhere. They must have been on Tumblr or
I mean, I
something.
wouldn't be surprised. Like that was the hot place to be in like 2012.
Yeah, yeah. And so this was like, yeah, like 2012. I made it through, but it was with Ernan's help because otherwise, it was very,
Yeah.
like once I am done with like what I feel like I want to do, it's very hard to continue, especially if you're being paid. It's like I don't want to be paid. I just don't want to do this anymore.
Well, I mean, in fairness to you though, like that's kind of the hardest brief to get. Like the just like I don't know, give us something,
That's
and
true.
there's
I,
no real scope or
Yeah, and there, in contrast, like when I worked with Google in 2018, I had to, I don't know if you saw them in the commercial, but I had to
you.
make,
Yeah, so the listeners know you did a commercial with Google for a pop up in New York City.
yeah, there was one time, I was the only time I've ever been on camera. I was shooting a commercial
Mm.
in New York, and it was I had to be at the studio at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it was weird because there was a director, and I was talking about myself and my things, and it was kind of supposed to be this natural, like, hey, I'm Hiller Goodspeed. This is what I make. It was fine. They were all very kind. It was great, but there was a lot of like, can you do that again? But maybe like more. And they would ask me to emote things that were really difficult for me. They would be like, oh, can you say that, but say it like it's Christmas morning, and like you're really like. But they would say things like that, and I don't want to say I was close to breaking down or losing it, but after you say one line, 8 times, it really like the naturalness of it is dead. It's long dead, and it just
Millhouse
it
saying
feels
Jiminy Jillikers over and over.
Yeah,
again.
and it's like the stress of like having to say it, but better and more convincing, and it gets less convincing with every take. And so the whole thing did not take very long, but by the end of it, I was like a bag of nerves. Like that was, having to like talk about myself in this way that was like very unnatural for me.
Yeah, well, it's so fascinating that direction has sort of become like the job that everyone in media wants to do. I want to become a director when it's like, anyone who I feel like has been in that position, that like acting position, like the direction that you get only makes you more self-conscious, and you're more like,
yeah, it's kind of when I'm left to my own devices, I can usually figure it out and like present it in a way that's like, good for most people.
Yeah.
But for a commercial, I'm not really presenting like in like a visual format or an audio, capacity. So it was challenging, but it was enlightening. I guess I learned, what being in a studio for, an hour and a half feels like when you're being filmed.
It looked like there was a lot of daylight in that studio too. So
it was very well
probably
lit.
People walking by, and
there was
all kinds of interference.
It was nice. It was a studio. There were maybe like 8 people there. There was a table with like bagels and cream cheese, and it felt very surreal to me because I was only there for 24 hours. I was there for one night.
Oh God!
And a lot of things happened, and it was actually really fun. I asked if my partner Aaron could come with me, and they're like, "Oh yeah, sure." So we both got to go to New York just for a Saturday night, and it was kind of a whirlwind.
They're also paying to do a weekend shoot. What?
Yeah, it was a Sunday morning, and I imagine they got there before I did, but I was there from like 7 to 9. I would say. All right. But it was
good on you, Goob.
It was really it was something.
And you have it done. You've accomplished it.
Yeah, I did it, and it was great. But I don't know if I'll be in any more commercials. But I mean, it's out there in the world if you wanted to track it down and see what it's like. They actually made it look quite nice.
Oh, it's lovely.
There's a lot of stuff going on in that space, and it was just a pop-up, so I don't think it was even there for more than a few months.
Well, especially at the end where it like turns into a whole like you're in this environment that's like moving and like CGI, which totally threw me.
Yeah, it was. So it wasn't CGI. So it was a physical set, and so it was actually like a giant.
What?
So by swinging on that swing, it triggered like these panels, which I had like also designed, I guess, or I had done artwork for. But it was that wasn't CGI.
That wasn't CGI. That was a real thing they built.
It was.
What the hell?
It was incredible. Like there were times where I would have a meeting at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and there would be a studio in Pittsburgh, and they're like, "Oh, where are the people that do this part?" And these people down in Denton, Texas, are doing this, and then we are. And so I'd be meeting with like 6 people, and it was all way beyond me and what I do. But it was nice to be a part of it. And but yeah, that was all physically. I have no idea how it operated. I didn't really take a closer look at it.
Do you know like how long it existed? Like what happened to it?
It was a pop-up, so I imagine that it was there for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then they probably disassembled it, and maybe it's like lying in wait somewhere. I don't know what happens to stuff like this.
Yeah, it's next to the Ark of the Covenant.
I imagine. Yeah, I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark in theaters a couple weekends ago, and it's like that vast warehouse. It's I imagine you wouldn't just throw something like that away, but then again, who knows?
It's saved forever in a matte painting where it will be truly preserved.
I like to think so.
Until they make that 4th movie and there's a whole bad chase sequence. And
Yes.
oh boy, that movie. What a movie that was.
But I also did like these index cards. I did like 45
Oh yeah.
cards, and so they each one had like, you know, it had to deal with the Google devices and like using them in your home and like using this and that, and they were kind of these like comics, like maybe 4-panel comics, and that was highly structured. So I would meet with like, you know, this team like, you know, a couple times a week, and they'd be like, okay, here are the next 4 concepts, and they would talk me through it, and it was actually great to work. It was a lot of work, but it was really easy because they're
Yeah.
like, okay, we need like a mom that's like frustrated because she has, you know, so much going on, but she's trying to grocery shop. And, you know, they would kind of like, they would paint the scenario and like tell me everything that's happening. And they're like, maybe you can have like a, you know, panel where, you know, she has an idea and there's like a light bulb over her head. And they would kind of suggest like, you know, frame by frame, like what the drawing could be, while still leaving like a room for artistic interpretation.
Wow.
So there were times where I was like, oh, I'm gonna make a little like, you know, thumb puppet, or I'm gonna make like a little like a, you know, something funny and silly that like isn't exactly what they've, you know, talked about, but is gonna fit within the like scope of the project.
But
And
you
so
at least kind of know from that conversation like what they're expecting and maybe
yeah,
where you can push. And
yeah, and it was great. And at that point, I had done quite a lot of work, so I was more comfortable with like, you know, taking direction and like working with them.
yeah.
But yeah, for the Evian project, they were like, I think they just kind of wanted to see what I could come up with, and like sometimes, yeah, the ideas, you know, fade away pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so it's after that point, it was really difficult for me to like continue coming up with additional concepts.
Well, and I think, I mean, that's the other like kind of hard part about freelancing is that I mean, I think having Aaron there was probably a big, I mean, it sounds like a huge help. And
Still a huge help.
like,
Yeah.
you know, but like if you're just on your own, like you kind of need to have somebody to bounce ideas off of, or you just, I mean, at least in my case, you just slowly drive yourself completely mad, and
Yeah.
then the ideas
I mean,
get very weird and bad.
Even still, like often a scenario is that I've done something and I'm like, I need to color this, and I have like a hard time with colors. I think I might be a little colorblind because like
That's
whenever I choose colors, like the first like iteration, it's always kind of like drab and like weirdly flat. And Aaron's like, no, you need like a strong red, or you need like a, you know, I have a hard time like with color, or I can.
That's so surprising to hear, because we were talking before the record about your book and how deliberate your color choices are, and like how like specific you went into like picking each one. Like,
So I have found that it helps tremendously to have like, you know, your spot colors, or like to have a certain like color palette that you can work with,
yeah,
like pre-existing, even if, you know, you're using, you know, these different spot colors and combining them and, you know, like making a crazy amount of colors. But initially choosing the colors, like if I'm going to do an illustration, I want, you know, 3 colors. Sometimes it can be hard to find the right hues and the right like contrast. And sometimes it's, you know, it's again a little muddy. So it can be challenging, but when you have, you know, like perimeters that you've set up, like it's much more easy to kind of figure things out.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing with the Evian project. Like it's that constraint that you kind of need
Right.
as a structure to give yourself something to like bounce around in.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at like, you know, all the colors and all the possibilities, and you know, you've seen so many things that have beautiful colors, and you're trying to like figure out what's going to work, it can be overwhelming. And you know, if you're working, there have been times where I've tried to work with like 8 colors and it just falls apart. But like, you know, if you only have 4 colors and you can, you know, and they're all kind of like in this family, it doesn't really matter how you mix them, like they're gonna feel like they all belong together.
Yeah, that's magical. So you're doing all kinds of like professional freelancing stuff. You're doing, is this post Canada move, or is this kind of in the in between zone?
This is an in between zone. I would say this is like, again, like 2012 or so.
Yeah.
And so like in this time, like I was, you know, working at the security job, like doing all these like random illustration projects.
Oh, you're still doing the security job.
I mean, the security job wasn't like a full-time thing. It was like, you know,
when
15, 20 hours a week. Yeah, it was like on the weekends, or like, you know, there's a Blazers game, like we need you to check bags for sandwiches and stuff. So it wasn't like demanding. And so I didn't really have like that much to do outside of like, drawing and working on stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was all while I was still in Portland. So I should turn off my phone.
That's a thing that I forgot to add to
Yeah,
this
I'm sorry
digital
about
list.
that.
It's on my little blue card, but I didn't bring those with me.
My phone is always on silent. I don't know why it's not.
I'm personally, I'm very much a fan of the great little switch that they put on the side that definitely always stays where you want it and doesn't ever break.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good design. What brought you up to Vancouver? What was the thing that finally lured you away?
So I was like reconsidering my like trajectory and what I wanted to do. And at this point, I wasn't really sure. I knew I liked design, like I loved design, and I loved drawing and illustrating, but it wasn't really, it didn't seem to be working for a career. And so I kind of like was at a loss of what to do. And I think I was like 20, 25 or 26.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to maybe consider something new. And I thought about what I could possibly do and like what I could do that I would enjoy.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult. And I'm like, I love libraries. Like I like being in libraries.
They're magical.
Like something about like the library as a community space. And like as a teenager, I would go to the library all the time. And like I had projects that I had to work on in high school in the library, which I'm actually grateful for because this kind of like got me going to the library more often than I had been. And I was always kind of drawn to them. And I had a friend, my friend Hannah. She got her MLIS in Florida. She works in Tallahassee still as an archivist. But I talked with her on the phone, and I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about going to library school, like as like a way to have a job that like I could stand to do, that like I wouldn't be like selling my soul or like doing anything that would be like too difficult.
Yeah, depleting the creative juices.
Yeah, and I needed something that was like in contrast to illustration work. And I kind of realized that like doing illustration full time would be like fun maybe at first, but also like draining in a way that like I might not have like I knew from the start that I didn't want to do that. And so I applied to UBC, the University of British Columbia,
where I am staying.
Are you staying there?
I'm yeah, so during the summer they turned their dorms into conference housing.
Oh wow.
But where I am staying, it's really more dorm energy because I would say the average age is 18.
Yeah. There's still a lot of students up there at this.
I think there are, yeah. And the ones that are staying in the dorms are they love to yell. Man, oh man. I did not remember how much an 18-year-old really loves just yelling all the time.
Wow. Yeah.
No control over the volume of their voice.
Yeah,
like unfrozen Austin Powers.
Dorm life, I remember those years.
Yeah, but I've gotten to have a healthy dose of UBC, and I've gotten to marvel at this magnificent library.
On like the Vancouver campus, there's like maybe like 10 libraries. Like there's like the main
there's a lot
like
of
the main
little
stacks,
ones.
but there's like the law library and there's like the Asian library and there's like many different like small specialty libraries.
Yeah, there's like an Indigenous studies library in a longhouse.
Yeah, there's you kind of have a lot of very interesting like library facilities.
Yeah.
And so I went there and I got my MLIS, and it was a way for me to move to Canada. And I'm grateful that I did that because I just became a Canadian citizen like a month ago or so.
Yay!
But it was kind of like a long road that began with like coming up to Canada to go to school, and then like postgraduate work visa, and then you get your like PR card. So it took a long time, but I began that 2013 when I moved here.
Wow.
But it kind of it was good to get out of Portland. Like I really loved Portland. Like it was a great place to be for like those years. Like I was there for about 3 years, and it was nice to have space to kind of like take time to like reflect on things and kind of like reorient my life and like kind of bring everything together with like the knowledge and understanding I had gained like after I graduated, because high school and college I was kind of doing everything in this way that I thought I had to do it, or like I was supposed to do it. Like you don't miss class in high school. You go to all the classes. You don't like
there's a guy in a uniform that will yell at you.
Yeah, it's like you go to college. Like I have English like at like 8:00. I wake up and I eat breakfast at the dining hall, and then I go to English class, and then I like doing all these things that like I I was a good kid. Like I was doing all the things I was
Yeah.
supposed to do. And then, at a certain point it's like, oh, I have like autonomy and I'm not used to like making choices for myself and like figuring out what I can do to like be a real adult human. And so I think the Portland years were good for kind of figuring that out.
It brought you here. That's the magic part.
Yeah, and I think like at the end of my time in Portland, I was like, I love design. I'm gonna illustrate forever, but like maybe it would be fun to like do something that isn't like standing in like a parking garage like at nighttime and when it's like 40 degrees and I'm like,
Oh God, I didn't think about that part of it.
yeah, it was just like it was. There were days where I'm like, this is really just like it's a job, but like I can't do this forever. Like I have to do something else. And like the idea, like I at that point had been visiting Canada like one weekend like every month.
Wow.
And so like we used to take the Greyhound and the Bolt bus. When the Bolt bus first started, it was like $15 round trip.
Crazy.
So I would just get on the bus and
gosh.
like sit on the bus for 8 hours and like listen to podcasts and like read and stuff. And I got to know Vancouver, and it seems like a really nice place. And I thought I could start a new life there. So, and I did, and it was a good move.
Now, Hiller, where can people find your work if they wish to find it?
So my work, Instagram, I would say is probably the best place. That's just at Hiller Goodspeed. I still post to Tumblr. Like I feel like Tumblr is like
You're one of the few remaining active.
It's like a
Tumblrs that I know
low
of.
stress situation where I feel like Instagram feels like it's this like you're posturing and you have to like it feels like if
You're
something
constantly
about
fighting against a tide that you are not in control of.
it
on
really
Instagram.
something about it is like dark to me. Like I don't know, but like
Yeah.
Tumblr kind of feels like Tumblr has its own issues, but it feels more like, hey, I can just like post this photo and be like, hey, look at this thing I did. Like, what do you think?
Tumblr feels like it's less involved in the active practice of evil, say.
Yeah, and so I do, every now and then I'll draw something that's like funny or whatever, and I'll post it there, but not Instagram. I have a Twitter. That's not really like art stuff, just kind of like thoughts and ideas that I have. And I have a website, hillergoodspeed.ca.
.ca.
I recently bought the Canadian domain because I was like, well, I'm in the process of becoming a Canadian, so I should probably, although you can still go to .com and it'll just transfer you over.
Yeah, nobody has a .us.
No, is that a thing? I know that
It is a thing.
I know that
I
there's
actually
like
did own one at one point.
there's like an insane amount of like domain names you can
Oh, it's so
use
many.
now.
Someday I'll own a .horse. .horses are very expensive.
Is there a .horse?
Oh, there is a .horse. They're so expensive though. They know what they have.
I need to look into those and maybe I can have one of those.
So
crazy sites.
yeah, possibly check out hillergoodspeed.horse sometime.
Yeah,
in the future.
maybe in the near future.
.pizza.
Yeah.
.horse.pizza. If that's not registered yet, I'm going to register for it right after this. So yeah, visit our website,
You can
.horse.pizza.
Grab it, sit on it, and maybe it'll pay off in the future.
I'm going to wake up my iPad so I can see what the things are that I need to say. There we go. Well, thank you so much, Hiller. Thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me to your wonderful city, by which I mean I came to your city.
Yeah.
I asked you to be here. Thank you for coming on the show, though.
You're welcome.
And thank you to the listener. What? If you like this show, why not give it a subscription, sometimes as it's called, if you're, speaking more fancily, I guess, in the method that you use to listen to podcasts. There are a couple ways to do it, but, if you don't want to leave it to chance, if you want to, really make sure you get to the right place, visit our website, dididothat.design. It's brand spanking new. I spent just a sickening amount of time fighting with Webflow to build it. So it's pretty good though. You can see some good images that go along with each and every episode, hand selected, for freshness and flavor. And if you want those same images, say, and stuff like that delivered to you, let's say less and less frequently, but perhaps on a platform that you already use, you can follow the show on Instagram and Twitter from that same website as well. So I'm Sean Schumacher. This is Did I Do That? And as we always say at the close of every episode,
Rutabaga.
Thank you. Bye. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Thank you.
There have been a couple years here where it's, there are weeks where it's just like the air quality is like you're watching the like index like website and it's like, oh, we probably shouldn't go outside today. And your windows are closed and you're like, it's hot and you can still smell the smoke and it's really just terrible.
What a normal climate.
Yeah,
Climate's in great shape.
Yeah.
No problems on the Carfax report, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The climate facts. Calming. Feel the space.
It's a nice space. I feel it.
Some of it is soft. Some of it is kind of where tape was, and then they peeled it off. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know what
Maybe the guitar's in tune. We can have a little interlude with some
live theme song attempt.
Yeah.
I don't know how to play the guitar, and I don't know what the things are that. What do they call it? Sheet music?
We could figure it out.
Something like that.